I woke up this morning with a weight on my chest, one that I didn't want to ignore any longer. It wasn't just the usual tiredness or stress from a busy day ahead. It was something deeper, a restless heaviness that seemed to anchor me to a place I didn't want to be but felt strangely trapped inside. My dreams last night had been scattered images of bills, numbers blurring together, faces that looked concerned but distant. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the unopened envelope that had arrived just yesterday, knowing it held reminders of what I owed. Not just the money, but the silent demand weighed down by interests and deadlines. I wrapped my hands around a lukewarm cup of coffee, trying to steady the storm inside. I asked God silently, why can't this change? Why do I keep hoping for something miraculous when I'm the one caught in this endless loop? I wasn't alone in this, because so many times, I felt like a hero in my own story, someone who was meant to overcome, who wanted to rise above the struggle. Yet, here I was again, cracked under the pressure of debts that seemed to multiply faster than my paycheck, crushing my spirit with every late payment and every new reminder. I tried praying for a miracle, holding my breath for some kind of divine intervention that would wipe the slate clean. But the miracle never came. At least not in the way I wanted. Instead, I found myself repeating the same mistakes, the same patterns, as if I were stuck in a cycle no prayer could fix. There's a silence in that place, the silence of not knowing if you're failing or if the problem is simply bigger than you. Sometimes, I would feel guilty, like I was the one to blame, that I wasn't managing things right, that I was careless or weak. Other times, it felt as though the universe was just testing me, pushing me down to see if I'd give up. But giving up was never an option. Not really. I knew somewhere deep inside that I was meant for more than this. I was supposed to be the hero, not the hostage of my own circumstances. One evening, I met with a friend who had gone through a similar storm. We sat on her worn-out couch, the kind of place that felt safe enough to hold our truth without judgment. She looked at me with quiet understanding and said something that shifted something inside me. Debt isn't your destiny. It's just a pattern. And patterns can be broken. At first, I didn't know how to respond. I thought, patterns? What did she mean? I'd been desperate for answers, struggling to find that one thing that will set me free. But even as I nodded, I realized that maybe that was the key, that this wasn't some unchangeable fate written in stone but something I had the power to rewrite if I dared to see it differently. Yet, the question lingered, like smoke that doesn't clear, what pattern? Where does it start? I looked back at my own story, at moments when I had felt powerless, trying to stretch what little I had to cover what felt overwhelming. I remembered the uneasy conversations with family about money never being enough, the fear that comes from watching bills stack up, the small compromises made just to keep afloat, inching deeper without realizing it. This was more than numbers on paper, it was a cycle of fear and shame, habits that quietly ruled me under the surface. Even now, as I recall those days, I can hear the quiet voice inside me, the one that kept asking, is this all there is? There was this flicker of hope, too, trapped beneath layers of discouragement, a hope that maybe, just maybe, the life I dreamed of wasn't out of reach. Maybe the hero inside me wasn't a prisoner, but someone ready to face the silence, confront the pattern, and begin a new chapter. I don't pretend to have all the answers yet. But I'm beginning to understand that the battle isn't just about money or debt. It's about breaking free from the past, from the loops that hold us hostage, and reclaiming the power that's within. And if you're hearing this, if you're carrying that same heavy burden, I want you to know you're not alone in this. There's a way through the darkness, though I understand it looks different for each of us. The journey ahead won't be easy, but it promises something worth fighting for, a chance to unshackle from what's been holding us down and step into a life where our worth isn't measured by what we owe or what burden we carry. There's something waiting for us on the other side, something healing, something freeing. I'm starting this walk, and I invite you to walk it with me. There was a moment when I realized my struggle with debt wasn't just a series of unfortunate events happening to me, it was woven into the very way I was programmed to respond to challenges, stress, and uncertainty. It reminded me of a worn-out record stuck on the same groove, spinning endlessly without moving forward. I watched my own reactions unfold, a mixture of panic, avoidance, and self-reproach, as if I were doomed to replay a soundtrack meant to keep me trapped. It struck me that I hadn't learned how to shift the needle. Instead, I'd been circling the same desperate moves hoping to dodge catastrophe. One evening, after a particularly frustrating day of sorting through balances and budgets that never added up, I sat reflecting on my grandparents' stories. They had grown up during times when scarcity was a given, and survival depended on tough choices and frugality. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became that many of my responses to financial stress had roots in inherited beliefs passed down through generations. From a young age, I absorbed lessons about scarcity disguised as wisdom, things like you must never spend unless absolutely necessary, or debt is a mark of weakness. These pronouncements molded my approach, creating invisible limits on what felt possible. When I first pieced this together, it was like uncovering a hidden script running beneath my thoughts, one I hadn't written but had been acting out faithfully. That revelation came with a bittersweet sting. On one hand, I felt validation. Here was an explanation, a narrative for why I kept ending up in the same vulnerable place. On the other hand, I saw how much I had been shackled by unspoken rules that weren't serving my growth at all. Instead of empowering me, they nurtured fear and guilt, making me believe the weight of debt was a reflection of my character rather than circumstances I could influence. Then I realized something crucial: changing my financial reality required more than fixing numbers on a spreadsheet. It demanded a transformation in how I interacted with failure and success. I had to cultivate patience where impatience screamed, and self-compassion where judgment wanted to take over. There was a certain grace in allowing myself the space to learn without the harsh voices in my mind dictating my worth. I began to see that progress would be uneven, sometimes slow, but every small step mattered. It wasn't about instant miracles but steady, conscious evolution. One afternoon, I stumbled across a modest community workshop focused on financial well-being, led by someone who shared a story eerily close to mine. Hearing her recount the moments she felt crushed under debts, only to find freedom by slowly shifting her mindset and habits, sparked something deep within me. She spoke about the importance of clarity, not just on where the money was going, but on why certain emotional triggers had us falling back into familiar struggles. I found myself nodding so intensely I feared my neck might cramp. She invited us to journal our fears, to map spending habits alongside emotional highs and lows, revealing how closely intertwined they were. I tried this approach later that night, uncovering hidden impulses to spend as a form of comfort or distraction. Recognizing when I was avoiding unpleasant feelings by swiping a card gave me a new kind of power, the power to pause and ask myself what I truly needed in those moments. Was it connection, rest, or encouragement? This awareness didn't freeze my progress but planted seeds of mindful decision-making. It felt as if a shutter was lifting inside, allowing sunlight to warm corners I'd long kept locked away. In the following weeks, I began to weave rituals into my daily routine, small acts like affirming that I am more than a balance owed, or practicing deep breaths to quell anxiety when numbers overwhelmed me. These gestures felt insignificant superficially but gradually created pockets of calm and strength. I also started seeking conversations beyond the usual ones, opening up with friends who didn't respond with shame but with encouragement and practical advice. Their perspectives nudged me to consider alternate paths to regain control, such as negotiating with creditors or exploring income diversification, which had once seemed too complex or risky. Looking back, it's clear my journey pivoted at the moment I stopped wrestling against my situation as if it defined me and began examining the roots beneath my reactions. I've come to understand that real change involves unearthing the subconscious scripts that steer our choices and then gently rewriting them. This inner excavation can feel unsettling, like excavating buried roots tangled with history and emotion, but it is necessary for new growth to emerge. Trusting this process doesn't mean I have all the answers or that setbacks won't arise, but it equips me with resilience born from insight rather than desperation. Now, consider how this applies when you face uncertainty. If the approach you've taken so far hasn't brought relief, perhaps it's time to explore the deeper programming guiding your responses. What source messages shape your beliefs about finances, responsibility, or worthiness? Could those inherited ideas be silently scripting your fears today? By bringing these hidden currents into the light, you start steering your ship through previously uncharted waters, crafting a route that leads not just to survival but to renewed hope and empowerment. Our histories, fears, and ingrained survival mechanisms do not have to be forever anchors. Touching these layers with curiosity, kindness, and courage can redirect our energy from repetitive struggles toward purposeful transformation. This isn't about a sudden fix but investing in long-term healing of the relationship we hold with ourselves and our circumstances. And in doing so, I believe we honor the truest part of the hero within, one who isn't weighed down by their story, but who learns to carry it with wisdom, grace, and renewed intention. At one point, I found myself standing at the edge of a worn-down bridge overlooking a river choked with debris, twigs, plastic bags, remnants of forgotten storms. The bridge looked unstable, creaking underfoot, but it was the only path I had. I hesitated, aware that crossing meant confronting a tangled mess beneath me, something I'd been avoiding for years. The currents below mirrored the chaos inside, all the missed payments, the mounting stress, the whispered fears that I was somehow beyond repair. My hands trembled slightly as I gripped the rail, and in that moment, I realized the real journey wasn't merely about fixing the numbers in my bank account. It was about navigating through the turbulent waters that shaped my decisions and emotions around money, waters I hadn't dared to chart before. What struck me most was how my relationship with debt reflected how I handled vulnerability. I had always kept my struggles tightly sealed, fearing exposure would signify failure or weakness. This armor, though protective, cut off genuine connection. One evening, while sharing coffee with someone I admired for their calm confidence, I confessed how I fought alone against relentless anxiety about finances. They looked at me gently and said, "You're carrying a secret burden by yourself, and only by sharing that weight can you start to feel lighter." At first, I resisted this idea, worrying that opening up might invite judgment. But as I thought back to some of my heaviest moments, I saw how isolation had intensified my suffering. The act of letting others into my story didn't diminish me, it humanized my experience and invited empathy. On a chilly autumn afternoon, I took a bold step, a small gathering at a community center focused on financial wellness. Among strangers, I listened as stories poured out, diverse and raw, tales of hardship, recoveries, and unexpected joys woven through the struggle with money. One woman shared how, after years of evading her bills, she began writing letters to her creditors, not demanding forgiveness but asking for understanding and workable plans. Her courage to communicate honestly reshaped her reality, contracts were renegotiated, and crushing stress eased. That story shook something inside me. I began to grasp that the scenario I felt trapped in was also malleable, influenced by my willingness to engage openly, take practical steps, and advocate for myself. Discovering these layers felt like peeling an onion, sometimes bringing tears, but each layer revealed fresh insights. I started to experiment with small conversations around my own financial fears, finding that expressing them aloud brought relief and even unexpected solutions. For instance, discussing late payments with my landlord transformed from a source of dread to an opportunity for dialogue. She responded with patience and suggested a flexible payment arrangement, something I might never have imagined without that honest exchange. It dawned on me that many obstacles existed because I viewed them through a lens of shame rather than possibility. In parallel, I noticed how my environment reflected and influenced my habits. My apartment was cluttered, unopened mail scattered across the kitchen counter, reminders overlapping with distractions. It was a physical manifestation of mental overwhelm. Deciding to clear this space gradually became a metaphor for inner clearing. I began dedicating minutes each day to sorting paperwork, organizing bills, and setting achievable goals. As I carved out this orderly corner, a sense of calm grew, signaling that some of the chaos within could be tamed through deliberate action. At times, I wrestled with feelings of impatience, yearning for fast solutions in a world obsessed with quick fixes. But this process demanded a slower rhythm, a dance with patience, resilience, and small victories. I learned to celebrate each phone call made, each budget updated, and even each day I resisted impulsive spending. These milestones might have appeared modest, but they were crucial patches sewing together a frayed fabric of hope. Reflecting on these experiences, I confronted a paradox. The very obstacles I had once viewed as insurmountable turned into invitations for self-compassion and growth. The pressure to perform financially had masked my need to heal emotionally and redefine my relationship with scarcity and abundance. I started to frame my situation not as a verdict on ability but as fertile ground for untapped creativity and resourcefulness. The breakthrough came unexpectedly during a walk in a nearby park. Surrounded by the steady pulse of rustling leaves and the occasional chirp of hidden birds, I realized I was more than the sum of these struggles. Life's unpredictability was part of the landscape, but I could choose how to navigate it. The bridge I'd once hesitated to cross wasn't a trap, it was a threshold, a crossing point leading to territory uncharted but promising. This moment wasn't about erasing the past but weaving it into a richer, more authentic self-understanding. Now, I invite you to imagine the hurdles you face not as fixed walls but as gateways. What conversations have you avoided that might open doors? Which small acts of organization or honesty could begin shifting your mindset? Sometimes, the greatest leaps start with a single, unsteady step onto a bridge that looks fragile but supports us when we trust it. Through this lens, we reclaim our narratives, not by erasing challenges but by learning to navigate them with intentionality and courage. As I sank deeper into confronting my financial realities, I realized that the struggle wasn't solely about numbers or budgeting. It was tangled up with how I perceived worth and identity. Early in this journey, I hadn't connected money and self-esteem in a meaningful way, but the cracks appeared unmistakably when I felt defeated after facing yet another unexpected expense. I remember sitting in the flickering light of my bedside lamp, the cold bill cold in my hands, when a whispered thought crept in, maybe I'm simply not cut out for success. That whisper wasn't just an opinion, it was a corrosive echo of a voice I'd internalized long ago, one that had been shaping my relationship with money far beyond conscious notice. This dawning insight revealed that my financial challenges were intertwined with deeply ingrained narratives about success, failure, and the standards I believed I had to meet. I started to question how much my values were truly mine, and how much had been handed down by others' expectations or societal definitions of achievement. Within these questions rose a new awareness: my self-worth had been tethered to external validation, and every unpaid bill seemed to chip pieces away from my confidence. The realization was unsettling. It meant that transforming my financial situation required rewiring these mental associations at a foundation level. My journey took an unexpected turn when I began exploring stories of individuals who had redefined their relationship with money in radical ways. I met Maya, a woman who had once been overwhelmed by debt yet chose to declutter her life intentionally, letting go not only of possessions but of limiting beliefs. She described the process with a metaphor that stuck with me: I had to uproot weeds in my mind's garden before the flowers could bloom. Hearing parallels in her experience, I recognized the importance of nurturing intentions rooted in self-respect instead of self-criticism. Her approach moved beyond typical financial advice, encouraging emotional healing alongside practical steps. Inspired by these conversations, I started experimenting with writing down affirmations that acknowledged my intrinsic value independent of my financial status. At first, I felt awkward and even silly, whispering phrases like "I am enough" or "my past does not define my future." Yet, gradually, this ritual stitched together a more compassionate inner dialogue, softening the harsh judgments I'd habitually imposed on myself. It served as a gentle reminder that, beneath layers of concern and anxiety, there existed an enduring core deserving of kindness. During this same period, an unexpected dialogue with my cousin Caleb shifted my perspective dramatically. Caleb shared how he had consciously rejected the conventional race of accumulating wealth and status, opting instead for a minimalist lifestyle aligned with joy and freedom. We debated fiercely over dinner, him defending his unconventional choices, me wrestling with skepticism rooted in fear of scarcity. Eventually, I realized his courage to diverge from prescribed paths was a form of heroism I'd overlooked. His example illuminated that defining success on personal terms, rather than societal standards dictated by debt cycles, opens avenues for genuine fulfillment. I remember a particular afternoon when, carrying this newfound mindset, I faced a crucial phone call, a creditor I had long avoided. Heart racing, palms sweaty, I chose honesty over evasion. To my relief, the representative responded with unexpected empathy, proposing a flexible repayment plan that aligned with my income fluctuations. That exchange cracked open a window into possibilities that had seemed unreachable before. More importantly, it taught me that vulnerability combined with proactive communication can transform intimidating situations into collaborative problem-solving moments. As the weeks unfolded, I noticed subtle but significant shifts in how I approached daily choices. Instead of reacting impulsively to stressors, I began pausing to ask myself what aligned with my values and goals. This often meant saying no to fleeting indulgences in favor of steadier investments in well-being and security. Trusting this process was challenging. Sometimes, old anxiety bubbled up, threatening to drown progress. Yet, each conscious decision to prioritize self-care and intentional living deepened my sense of agency and hope. At the heart of this transformation was a surprising paradox. Surrendering control over immediate gratification enabled me to regain genuine control over my life's direction. Accepting imperfections in my journey, embracing discomfort, and resisting the lure of quick fixes cultivated resilience that wasn't about brute willpower but about gentle perseverance. The metaphor of climbing a steep mountain came to mind, each step upward visible only moment by moment, the summit distant yet steadily approaching with every mindful choice. Now, imagine stepping away from blame or judgment when facing your financial struggles. What stories about yourself and your worth might you choose to rewrite? What new narratives could empower you to act courageously and compassionately? Our inner landscapes are vast, and uncovering these layers of meaning within can expand the horizon of what's possible. This path, though imperfect, offers a renewal grounded in authenticity and self-truth that no external circumstance can diminish. Reflecting on this journey so far, I recognize how each revelation and challenge has woven itself into a complex tapestry, one that doesn't unravel easily but invites me to trace the threads with intention. It's like standing inside a mosaic, the colors and fragments forming a broader picture that shifts subtly as I move, inviting me to explore nuances I might otherwise overlook. This understanding doesn't come from neatly packaged answers or sudden epiphanies but emerges from the gentle accumulation of moments where vulnerability met insight and discomfort sparked growth. The terrain has been uneven, at times shadowed and unpredictable, yet within that terrain lies fertile ground for a transformation that feels authentic and deeply rooted. In this unfolding scene, I find myself caught between what once confined me and a horizon that whispers of freedom, an invitation that doesn't demand perfection or immediate resolution, but a willing heart ready to engage with complexity. It's a dance between tension and release, where old patterns no longer dictate actions, yet new rhythms remain tentative, awaiting discovery. I sense the echoes of earlier wrestlings, how fear and hesitation tried to hold me captive, but now those echoes serve less as chains and more as signposts guiding me toward a more intentional way of being. There's a fragile courage stirring, not loud or boastful, but steady, like a flame flickering in the dusk, offering warmth in moments when shadows loom largest. Engaging with these inner contours has also shifted how I perceive influence and control. It's no longer about commanding every outcome or erasing uncertainty but about learning to move fluidly with the currents life presents. Like a sailor who senses the wind's subtle shifts, I'm beginning to understand when to steady the sails and when to relax my grip, trusting the vessel's momentum. In embracing this posture of receptiveness, I discover that progress isn't linear or guaranteed, it is punctuated by setbacks, recalibrations, and unexpected detours. Yet each step forward, no matter how small, contributes to a cumulative strength that grows quietly beneath the surface, unseen but palpable. There's a profound paradox at play here. Surrendering doesn't equate to giving up, and confronting limitations opens pathways to empowerment. I grapple with this tension daily, aware that letting go of former certainties can evoke disorientation, but also recognizing that clinging too tightly to established narratives stifles potential. This delicate balance between holding on and releasing becomes an art form, one I am learning, imperfectly but persistently. The sensations of fear, hope, frustration, and relief intertwine in a dance that defies simple categorization, inviting me to inhabit complexity rather than shy from it. I find it illuminating to consider how inner landscapes mirror external realities, each influencing the other in an intricate dialogue. Patterns engraved deep within can manifest as tangible obstacles around us, yet confronting those external challenges without addressing the subtle internal currents often leaves us adrift. There's a rhythm to this interplay that demands patient listening and courageous action, a willingness to inhabit discomfort and ambiguity while inching toward clarity. This dynamic reminds me of watching a forest through seasonal cycles. What looks barren and dead at one moment contains seeds and secret stirrings preparing for renewal. As I move through these reflections, a quiet invitation arises, to trust in the process unfolding within and around me, to honor the layered nuances that come with change, and to acknowledge the hero's path is rarely straightforward. The path meanders, veers unexpectedly, and calls for resilience that transcends mere endurance. It requires a softness of heart that can hold pain without being consumed, a clarity of vision that sees possibility through fog, and a relentless commitment to keep stepping forward, even when the way is obscured. There are moments when doubt seeps in, whispering that transformation might be beyond reach or that I'm ill-equipped to rewrite these narratives. Yet in other moments, something steadies me, a subtle knowing that growth is less about arriving perfectly and more about becoming curious companions to our own unfolding. We hold within us not only the scars of past encounters but also the embers of future strength, waiting to be fanned into flame. The horizon feels simultaneously daunting and inviting, urging us beyond comforts and fears into a terrain where courage and grace entwine. Turning inward now, I sense this is not an endpoint but a threshold, a gateway beckoning us towards something that calls for clearer eyes and braver hearts. It is a space woven with both challenge and tenderness, demanding that we embrace complexity without losing sight of dignity and hope. In this liminal place, the contours of possibility expand, shaped less by our mistakes or limitations and more by the resilience we cultivate through intentional action. The story we carry, woven with diverse threads, becomes a source of strength, not a shackle. In this moment, poised between what has been and what may come, I invite us to breathe deeply into this unfolding narrative. It's a whisper, a pulse, a quiet thrum beneath the noise, a beckoning toward emergence that calls us to listen carefully and prepare with open hearts. The inevitable next steps ask for nothing less than the full embrace of all we are becoming, with compassion, patience, and a stirring readiness to meet what lies ahead. In the quiet hours when the world slows and I face myself without distraction, I feel the weight of everything that shaped me, the fears, the missed chances, the tangled webs of obligation and regret. But beneath that heaviness, a subtle shift has taken root, a promise whispered not in thunder but in the softest breath, urging me to see beyond what once imprisoned me. It's as if the shadows around my past debts and burdens begin to recede, revealing a horizon painted with unexpected colors, possibility, renewal, and a courage I didn't know I possessed. In those moments, I realize that my story is not sealed by the struggles endured, but by the renewed vision I choose to carry forward. My journey through confusion and resistance brought me to an understanding that transformation demands more than willpower or discipline. It calls for a tender, honest reckoning with the parts of ourselves we often resist acknowledging. There is a powerful alchemy in approaching our flaws and fears with patience and grace, allowing old wounds to soften so fresh growth can break through. This is not a neat or linear path, it is a winding road where setbacks are not failures but invitations to deeper insight. Every falter taught me that resilience is cultivated in the soil of vulnerability and that healing begins when we stop disguising our pain with shame. Late one evening, I found myself talking quietly to a trusted friend, voice hushed as if confessing a secret to the night. What if my biggest obstacle isn't the debt itself, but the patterns woven through my mind, those repetitive whispers of inadequacy and scarcity? Her eyes held a warmth that reassured, then perhaps freedom begins by gently unraveling those threads, one by one, until you shape your own narrative. That exchange lingered with me, an echo that continues to ripple. It invited me to shift my gaze, from fighting an external enemy to embarking on an inner excavation, discovering hidden truths that ultimately set me free. I have learned the indispensable value of asking for help, of breaking the silence that often keeps pain entrenched. When I dared to speak aloud the burdens that weighed me down, I discovered a surprising tenderness in others, a shared humanity crisscrossed with empathy and lived experience. Opening my story created a space where healing could breathe, where solutions surfaced not as abstract ideals but as tangible steps embedded in connection. This vulnerability became a quiet revolution against isolation, disarming fear with the power of authentic presence. There is an undeniable grace in embracing imperfection, in realizing that the work of freeing ourselves from invisible shackles is ongoing and unfolds at its own pace. I have come to cherish the subtle victories, the mornings I wake with resolve, the small rituals that nourish my spirit, the moments I choose hope over despair. These acts accumulate like threads in a tapestry, weaving a fabric stronger and more beautiful than fear could fray. They affirm that progress is not defined by flawless execution but by steady commitment and self-compassion. What resonates most deeply is the understanding that the limits we perceive are often echoes reverberating from external voices and old narratives that no longer serve us. When we begin to question these inherited stories, we peel back layers, revealing the fertile ground beneath where new beliefs and intentions can take root. This process is not erasure but transformation, a gentle reimagining of ourselves as creators of possibility rather than prisoners of circumstance. I envision a future where each step forward is an act of reclaiming power, not as a sudden conquest but as a patient unfolding of strength woven through self-awareness, honesty, and community. It is in this unfolding where true liberation lives, a place where debt, fear, or guilt no longer hold dominion, and the soul can breathe in freedom. The path stretches ahead, uncertain yet inviting, a canvas awaiting the brushstrokes of courage and grace we bring with us. In the quiet moments before sleep, when doubt and hope intertwine, I offer myself a silent vow, not to chase perfection or escape difficulty, but to keep moving with integrity and openness. If you find yourself carrying burdens like mine, know that the journey towards release is a mosaic built of flawed, beautiful pieces coming together. Though the night may seem endless at times, dawn always awaits, sometimes softly, sometimes blazing with light. And it is in rising, over and over, in the face of our fiercest storms, that we find the truest measure of our strength.